Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, and where we answer your questions every single day. If you've got questions, of course, you can ask them on Makana. You can vote on them. You can chat about them. If you're not there, you can actually go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask those questions 24/7. So if you see the show later, of course, you can ask them then, and then we'll get to them as soon as we can. So go ahead and throw them into askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from Douglas Carmichael this morning, and Douglas says, when tracking hardware synths to a DAW, digital audio workstation, how can you minimize background noise, and should you use a noise gate?
Go, Jeffrey.
Minimizing through a noise gate does not make any sense to me. I would probably, I'd be checking cables. I'd be checking, repatching maybe DI boxes, bringing that in. Then just figuring out where that hum's coming from and how to take care of it at the source rather than putting a noise gate in. I'm not a fan of noise gates at all.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So what Jeffrey mentioned about direct boxes, DI boxes, direct DI is direct injection, and that converts a instrument category signal, so an instrument level signal, into a mic level signal to go into a preamp. They generally fall into two categories, which is passive and active. Active ones obviously require power. Passive uses a transformer to do the conversion. The key thing is always to pair to the opposite. So if you have an active instrument, you use a passive DI because the active instrument already has a well-controlled output impedance, so you don't need as high of an input impedance that you get from an active DI. So active DIs work great for like a passive bass where you need an extremely high input impedance, and also the passive instrument will not create a very large signal that could possibly clip the electronics in an active DI. So for a hardware synth, I would recommend a passive DI like a radial. And I mean, I would recommend radial DIs for any DI because they just are the cream of the crop of DIs. And if you're getting noise, you're talking about a ground loop. So that means that you're getting ground from the power where the hardware synth is plugged in, and you're also getting ground through the microphone preamp, which is also plugged in, and there could be a slightly different voltage level between the two grounds, and you're actually getting flow through the shield. And all DIs have a ground lift, which breaks the shield on one end and will prevent that ground loop from happening. So that's the first place to go to see about cutting noise there.
Good, Mickey.
And yeah, and just to add to that, another thing that might be worth visiting is the gain staging across the entire signal chain. If you are having to crank up the preamp that comes after the DI, you might be sending out too low a signal out of the synth itself. So you might want to review your gain staging and make sure you're getting a healthy signal out of the synth.
Next question.
Peter Moore comes to us from Auckland, New Zealand. Thoughts on the ACE Studio AI Vocalist plugin as demonstrated here by the legendary Dr. Mix, and he's got a link for it.
Jeffrey.
That was a pretty impressive thing. I think this is the next iteration of voice tuning and being able to bring in harmonies. That's where I would probably use it. So if I sang a harmony or if I sang the melody, I could actually kind of play with where the harmonies go. You can bring in dips, you can bring in vibrato, you could change the voice, you could just hum the tune and add the words. So I was pretty impressed with how that works. That's how I'd use it. Yeah, there's going to be some people that are going to recreate songs like he was doing a Stevie Wonder tune, and he was they turned it into a female voice, and it was just his monotone tones that started it all. So it's pretty impressive. We'll see what happens from there. I definitely would want to try it out.
One of the things that I think came in office hours, but I came up in a conversation over the weekend. I was talking to an artist, and they were like, yeah, the AI is great, except that the only way you make money is to perform. So you can do all this stuff with AI, and you can make all these adjustments, and you can do all this pitch shifting, and you can have the AI do all the whole song, but no, there's no money in that. he said to me, he's not worried. He's like, there's money in performance, actually, be going out on tour and connecting with folks. So I hadn't thought of that angle until he brought it up. But he just said, sure, you can do that, but what money are you going to make at doing that? And so how many people are actually going to do it if they can't generate any revenue from it? Next question.
Jim Brooks in New York comes up next. What's the best way to get a live drone, in this case a DJI Mini, to an ATEM Extreme ISO to be included in the live stream? Thanks.
Samuel?
Yeah, this can be kind of tricky depending on how what drone you have. This is the Mini, so I don't think there is any option to get an HDMI output of there. Some of the higher end drones like the Mavics, you can get extra controller with HDMI output, like a smart controller. But you have to check it. There's so many different controllers and generations, so you have to check it. On a lower end drone, then you could potentially use the app and do like a RTMP stream out to something like OBS or Remix or whatever. And then you pipe that into your ATEM, but it will be a lot of latency and not so reliable. So try to find something with HDMI output.
Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You probably are going to have to upgrade to one of the drones. Oops, here. She's that. No, not that. That. There you go. There's the thing. This is the controller that Samuel was talking about, and it doesn't work with the Mini, but this is what we did on John's rocket launch. I didn't know you could do this, and Keenan and Jack flew the drone. No, it was Jack and Chris Widener flew the drones, and I didn't even know you could do this. It was really cool. Just HDMI plugged in, done. Dunsky.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mariella Zusha Marie in Webelow. What did you buy during Amazon's big spring sale or from USITT, and why did you buy it? What will it be used for in your business?
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. Why did I buy it? Do I need any more hardware? I think not. I bought I didn't know there was a spring sale, but I just bought this and it hasn't arrived yet. To test it out, this is a pile. We know about the Shure XLR to a USB interface that's compact. Pile makes one for about a third the price. It was $35. Now it's $44. But it looked pretty interesting. It has pretty good specs on it. It has so it basically takes an XLR in and it changes it to a USB out, and it has headphone monitoring in it. The nice thing about this one is you don't have to have an app. Unlike the Shure, you have to have an app to change any of the settings on it. This has actual knobs on the front. You can adjust the headphone level and the mix of the USB return and your local microphone, so you can hear your local microphone with zero latency mixed in with the return, like the Zoom call in the headphones, supposedly. And my only downfall on it is it has a USB mini plug on it, not a micro, not a USB-C, but a USB mini. So that's one thing. And I also ordered yesterday to get, and it's coming today, is one of these media players, which I showed yesterday, and I was going to test it out. I have lots of media players. I was going to test this one out. It was only $34. It does HEVC 265 decoding as well, so I was going to try that out and see how well it works for playing back video loops seamlessly forever and ever. You just turn on a monitor with this plugged into the power, and it'll boot up and start looping a video on it for, point of sale or for video kiosks or for signage.
Good, Jeff.
So I got an Anker 747 charger, which seems really boring, but it's got 3 USB-C and 1 USB-A outputs, and it's 150 watts spread between them, so I can charge a laptop, an iPad, a phone, and a watch, or on production, I can charge, and maybe not fully fast charge, but I can keep charged 2 laptops and an iPad. The great thing about it is we all have the Apple, and there's the Anker, which is quite a lot smaller and gives us 4 outputs. So excited about that.
That's a great one. I think I've given up the Apple chargers, kind of sit in a box. Sometimes there's places somewhere in the house that I need a single use, thing for the Apple ones, but I have definitely moved to a variety of different chargers, like the one that Jeff posted there. I have to admit, I don't really pay much attention to sales. I just pay attention to what I need. So I'm like, when things come up, I'm like, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this. I try not to get too caught up in some point of reference, just because I'm always afraid that I'll buy too much. So too much food, too much eating. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Up next, Apple could reveal AI strategy June 10th to 14th, along with iPhone 16 at the WWDC via first day the keynote. What are your fondest expectations for AI and iPhone? And he's got a link to the CNBC announcement about the WWDC.
Jeffrey?
I think the biggest thing that we're going to see, the focus is the ability to actually start using and writing apps for all Apple products. Because the more apps you have, the better. The more options you have, and therefore people want to get more iPhones. They'll want to get more Vision Pros. They'll want to get more everything like that. So I'll expect that to happen. I'll expect the S word and to keep everybody from getting theirs activated, to get improved in getting questions and answers from there. I think that they're going to approach AI in a completely different model than just like a Chat GPT, because we technically already have that.
Go ahead, Chris.
I totally agree, Jeffrey. I think I'll be surprised if Apple starts waving an AI flag over the buildings and bragging about, oh, we have this AI and this machine learning. I think their approach to all of artificial intelligence is to just make the stuff smarter. I had mentioned, and Alex teased me about the autofill in most of the Apple apps. I know you hate it, Alex. I really like it. It has changed the way I type, because I start to type and I go, oh, those next few words are fine. I hit the space bar and I'm only typing like the beginning of sentences and stuff. It's kind of interesting. I understand sometimes it's not right. You say it's always wrong. I think it's right most of the time. Maybe I'm writing more simple stuff than you. But I think that's going to be Apple's approach to artificial intelligence. They're just going to make their stuff smarter, and they're not going to brag about it.
Yeah, I'd actually be surprised if they'd say very much about it. I mean, they're probably going to talk about it a little bit. I don't think they feel like they have any rush. They're not trying to impress anybody. Like they have they have largely a constituency of folks that are they're happy with where they're going. They're not going anywhere. Apple doesn't have to like suddenly give them the coolest thing, because I have Midjourney and ChatGPT on my phone right now. I don't feel this rush to that I need it to be all integrated with everything I do. I think that the fundamental thing that I think Apple tends to understand about their consumers, as opposed to what a lot of other folks are looking at, which is Apple, we just, Mac users or Apple users tend to just want things to work. They don't really care about having the coolest, fastest thing in the world. They just don't want it to take up time being fiddly. So Apple can spend a lot more time not making it fiddly, and all we care about is that it just works when we open it up. So we get really tweaky about things doing funny things and odd things. We're much less driven by things doing every new thing. And I think that means the technology actually means less to an Apple user than to other users, because they just want it to just fit into their lifestyle, not actually be their lifestyle. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, I used Audiomovers Inject to route my digital audio workstation audio into Zoom's ZoomAudioDevice for collaborative sessions, and it worked very well. Has anyone ever tried it? And he's got the Audiomovers link there.
Oh, Samuel?
Yeah, well, I haven't used it myself, but I'm really interested in this. I'm going to test it, and it looks like it's a routing tool. But the special thing that I think is interesting is that it's also Windows compatible. Most of these are like loopback and stuff only work on the Mac. So I have an application I'm going to try it on. So thank you for sharing it.
Good, Jeff.
Yeah, this has a lot of the same functionality that Pro Tools added to their DAW with Pro Tools Aux I/O. However, Pro Tools Aux I/O is limited to Pro Tools, so it doesn't work with every other DAW on the planet that Audiomovers will, and it's limited to Mac only. So again, that the Audiomovers expands the capabilities of that, basically allowing you to patch in and out to apps freely at will.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Wilmington, Delaware today says, 2 days ago I used ZoomISO and LiveMind on a remote Mac Mini for documentary records from a Zoom meeting. It was awesome. Storage was an issue for me. What Mac solutions might there be? And he's throwing Guy the ball. So,
Good, Guy.
Incoming. I guess I'll catch that one. Thanks, Tlaloc. Yeah, I've been playing in the cloud for a couple of years now. With the AWS side, if you're not going to go Mac, you can rent these machines for $1.20 an hour. So these machines on the PC side are rentable for super, super, super cheap. If you're going to do a Mac in AWS, you have to rent it for 24 hours. So it kind of takes the fun out of being able to rent something for the minute. So if I was doing these, I'd probably do them with our infrastructure, which is a Zoom Room and vMix, or you could use LiveMind or something. There's a variety of NDI recorders depending on what codec that you want. But I do love the Mac side of it. And so Mac Stadium's been where we've been playing. In fact, you'll be interested to see this, which is, let me pull up Splashtop. So here is a screenshot of one of the Mac Ultras running Cinebench. It is, I know this is hard to see, but it's at 28,800, which is just like 1,200 below the fastest thing that they tested, which was an AMD Ryzen Threadripper. So if I open up something like Resolve and I say, hey, give me an H.265, and I say, add to queue, and I say, go ahead and render that. Did I hit that? Yeah, there it goes. Render queue. Oh, render. And then we bring up something like iStatistica and look at the cores. This is the beauty of what we're talking about here, is just being able to do an interview like that up in the cloud, take all those feeds, edit it, then crunch it down super, super fast, and then export it back out because your speed up here is at 10,000 megabits a second. So this to me is the beauty of that workflow, is not only capturing it with something like ZoomISO or even Mimo Live now. So this is a Mac Stadium instance again. And Mac Stadium is in the, let me pull up that Chrome browser. The machine that you're seeing right now is a $549 machine, but if you only need it for 1 gig for the month, you have to rent it by the month, unfortunately. But I started at 109 and then walked my way all the way up. And what wound up happening was that it was cheaper to buy the machine. So after a while, you just go, wow, 7.5 months equals $4,000, and I'll just buy the machine. So we wound up getting the machine. So you just got to figure out the workflow and if it's worth it to buy it, or you could justify owning it. And I'm excited to see what Fenwick says, because editing in the cloud and having multiple people being able to be at an apartment or in a coffee shop and edit something, listen to the edit, rough it out, and somebody else comes in and colors it, cleans it up, and export it. I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. I think Talalek's specific question, though, was about storage. He says he's running out of storage. So when you rent from like Mac Stadium, what storage is available, and what is the mechanism if you need to use additional storage?
Yeah, so good question.
You muted yourself.
Here's the screen which allows you to add additional storage. So if I wanted another 1 terabyte, so this is the back end of Mac Stadium, where I can now say, hey, give me another 2 terabytes or 4 terabytes. And so I would just hit add, and they would stick that thing in there. So on AWS, it's even easier. I mean, I can do it without having to ask them. We do this all the time. Do
you think somebody's actually running over and plugging a drive into that computer? I've
had them plug it in HDMI adapter for me in the cloud, which was bizarre to me. I was like, hey, I'm not getting 4K resolution. They're like, hold on, we'll send a tech over there. And I think they stuck an HDMI dummy plug on it or something. But yeah, there's real people in those data centers. So there's 18,000 Mac Minis and some people running around like leprechauns, putting in HDMI dummy adapters.
That's very cool. Thanks.
Yep. Miggy?
Yeah, I'm unsure as well as to what exactly Tlaloc is asking about. But just in case Tlaloc's asking for a recording solution for Mac OS, there is you can use Memo Live for that, and there's also a sort of but more heavy-handed solution, there's Softron's movie recorder. It's a lot more expensive though, but it can record multiple streams of NDI.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I never use the onboard storage inside of a Mac Mini for the recordings. It's always going to be external storage, either through USB-C cable or a Thunderbolt cable, or through a network drive. And then once the recordings are done, it definitely will get onto a network drive like a Synology or anything like that.
Good guy.
Yeah, and also we've been doing some experiments with Riverside, and if you like Zoom for the simplicity, that makes it great on guests. But Riverside, if you want the highest quality recordings, it's worth running a test. I did a test with David Brady. We did about an hour-long session, and when I gave him the files, I sucked them down here, and I have a very fast connection. It was over 20 gigabytes for that to grab all the ISOs. There was 3 people in the meeting, and it'll actually give you a Final Cut and a Premiere file if you want them. So with everybody all tracked out. So Riverside, and the quality is shocking. So, but if space is a concern, stick with Zoom because those are about 6 megabits per minute or per second versus some of the larger sizes that you'll get with. Okay, I see Chris raising his head. Like, what's up, Chris? You're freaking out.
Did I hear you right? They'll give you a Final Cut project out of Riverside?
Yep.
Where's that checkbox?
I'll pull it. Make it a question, and I'll pull it up real quick.
What? No
next
way.
question.
It's great.
Real-time problem solving. John Jordan's up next from New York. I have a bunch of Oh, by the way, this is a QR code question, just to remind those of you who are playing in that ballpark. I have a bunch of Hyperdeck Studio 4K Pros, and their FTP connections consistently fail, causing me to have to power cycle them. Any tips or tricks for better FTP reliability, or what's causing this consistently? Thanks.
Courtney?
Hard to know what's causing it. It depends perhaps on what FTP client you're using to connect to them. But one thing I would try is turn off DHCP and make sure you manually assign IP addresses to each of your Hyperdecks. That way they won't be reassigned IP numbers, so that when you try and connect to them with your FTP client, it won't be swapping around between drives. The other thing is the Hyperdeck 4Ks, have multiple drive ports on there, and they automatically, as they fill up one drive, they switch to the next. And so I'm wondering if the drive letter assignments that are happening in your FTP client are getting confused by the drives that are being swapped in and swapped out. If they're assigning a fixed drive letter to a specific drive and you swap it out with another one, if it's getting confused there and you have to reestablish a connection from what was previously your connection to a hard drive on the FTP client is now a different drive. So check, that might be what's causing the problem, but hard to say.
Good guy.
Yeah, I've been using CyberDuck with mine, and I have the 10 gig. So I'd look at your infrastructure because with the 10 gig port, you got to have a 10 gig switch and a 10 gig NIC to make it all work together. Unless you're doing a direct connect, which you can, then you would just self-assign an IP address, and maybe that's a thing to do is just try direct connect and just go one machine and just use it strictly for transfer. Don't try to edit off that thing; it will mess with the media. So just transfer immediately. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to drag this file into Resolve and start editing. It will corrupt media. So I found I had an issue where I formatted as a never mind. It's a different issue. But there are ways to mount Mac volumes on a PC, and if you edit off of them, it will corrupt the drive. Well, bad lesson I learned with what's OWC's little Mac converts Mac to PC formatter. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like a little Mac drive.
Mac drive, Mac
drive.
Mac drive.
Yeah. So, but to answer the question, just be careful and try a 10 gig proper NIC and switch.
Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada is up next. Another QR code question here. I recently learned how to use my camera phone from my watch. Are there any other apps, workable or operable, from the watch that also could be useful during live production?
Jeffrey?
Oh, absolutely. So what I have on my watch is I have all my light programs like Govee. They have that. I have, when I use Filmic Pro, there's a Filmic Pro app for the watch. I had, in the old house, I had my shades set up through IoT, so they'd go up and down. And I just learned about a new thing called Link and Link, which is about sensors. So you break a sensor, and you could do a whole series of different things. Like, for instance, if you put it, they had it if you on their remote control. So if you lift the remote control off, the sensor puts everything into movie mode, for example. Authy, which is another app that you can use if you want to authenticate any type of logins. Mac, you can set it up for your Mac to unlock, and if you're installing programs, then you can double click on there to unlock your Mac for that. And then Unity is also on the watch, so I can not use a computer. I think I used it for NAB last year or something like that. Biggest problem is the crown, trying to get those apps up, and then of course the something that I'd really want to see is a Stream Deck or a companion option for watch, just a one button thing. So just a basic function would be kind of fun for that. But those are the ones that I have on my watch.
Good, Bill.
+1 on using your watch to control both cameras and video in this case. I've learned, one of my favorite convention kind of rigs is a monopod with my phone mounted on a gimbal up on the top of it. Or not the gimbal, because I use a gimbal separately, but the monopod with the phone up on top. And what I have learned to do, interestingly enough, is rather than holding the monopod this way, I reverse my wrist. That means that I'm looking at my watch and can see the live feed from my camera on my wrist, which is incredibly useful for framing and getting shots right. So I think the more we get in terms of this back and forth between a second screen that you can wear and the primary screen on a camera, the more useful it is. So I would highly advise continue to play with this, enjoy it. I love being able to flip a monopod around and get a dog's eye view essentially of things. It's just really useful for productive creativity.
Yeah, I think that I play with my watch in post-production or shooting for post-production. I don't really use the watch in live because it goes to sleep all the time. So I really wish that I could override that. Like, for instance, I would use Atomic Clock, works on my watch, and it but it turns off, at some point. And I actually talked to the developer about it. He's like, "It's not me, it's Apple." I'd leave it on all day. And because I'd love to have that kind of thing, that kind of control over it. That's the one complaint I have about. That's my general complaint about the watch, is not being able to override its ability to stay active. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand's up next. I was asked recently about buying speaker cables, i.e. cables from guitar amplifiers to cabinets. And is there a standard with regards to impedance? And also, can someone explain balanced versus unbalanced in this, plugging into a mixer from the DI out?
Jeff?
So we're talking here about analog audio running over electrical wires as electricity. And so there's 4 sort of categories of those signals. And they start with the smallest one, which is mic level. And mic level is balanced and tends to have low output impedance and somewhat moderate input impedance. Then we go up to instrument level. Instruments, guitars, keyboards, and all those sorts of things are generally unbalanced. They're the ones that give us lots of problems with poor output impedances of guitar pickups. And then where we run things sort of at line level, that's a nominal level that's amplified up from mic level, but does not require big fat wires. And then we get to speaker. Speaker is the only place from amplifiers to speakers where we have to get work done. We actually have to move motors that are the voice coil of the speaker and have to actually get sound in the air, pressure moving. So there we need lots of current and lots of voltage to make power. And so there you need big fat wires. So when you're talking about going from your guitar amp to your speaker, that's speaker level. So it's going to use large wires. Hang on, I'm pulling up one other slide here to talk about the balanced things. So 2 of those categories, the mic and the line, worked as balanced, and the instrument and the speaker work as unbalanced. Unbalanced speakers are fine because balanced is there to give us noise immunity to prevent outside things from leaking into the audio. And speaker levels are so big, it's high voltage, high current, that there's no noise that's going to leak in and actually cause your speakers to move. So it's not a problem in those, but you do need large cables. Here's a quick thing to show you. On the top, we have unbalanced, and you see there are 2 wires because you need 2 wires to complete a circuit. Electricity has to go and come back. And then in a balanced circuit, you send the audio twice, one in normal polarity and one in reverse polarity. And what happens at the end is we take the difference between those. Anything that's noise that gets into the wire hopefully gets canceled out. So what you need to do with guitar to speaker cabinets is keep your lines short, because the wire will have some amount of impedance in it. Generally, amplifiers are low output impedance. Speakers are low input impedance. We're talking 8 ohms or less, kind of that neighborhood. And in order to get the most power from the amp to the speaker, we need those to be matched. So we want 8 ohm output on the amplifier, 8 ohm input on the speaker. So we don't want to cause, if you have a wire that is 1 ohm per 100 feet and you use 200 feet of wire, adding 2 ohms of resistance, and 2 ohms doesn't seem like a lot, except when you add it to the 8 ohm speaker. Now you've changed it to 10. That's a big 25% difference. Mickey, you got more to add to this?
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd say specifically about the gauge of wire, it highly depends on how many watts you're running through from the amplifier going to the cabinet or going to the speaker. For a typical, like say, like a 1,000 or 2,000 watt amplifier, you're probably looking around 12 to 18 gauge wire for that. Again, like it highly depends on how many watts you're running through it.
I got a question. What happens if you have a balance cable and you plug it into a guitar and then into your amp or DI? What happens there? Does it manage that well, or does it really need to be just a TS cable?
The ring will generally be ignored because there's no contact in the guitar or in the guitar amp to touch that ring. So there's a contact for the tip and there's a contact for the sleeve, right, and there's no contact to touch the ring.
Got it. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, it depends on the connector. Most of the time, the sleeve and the ring will be shorted out, but it varies from connector to connector. But yeah, as Jeff mentioned, the ring will be canceled out or ignored.
I got it, Courtney.
Yeah, and speaker wire hasn't been mentioned yet. Doesn't have to be shielded. Sorry about the glitch. But you do want to observe polarity. If you're hooking up, if it has multiple speaker outputs, usually it will have a polarity marked on it, like a plus and a minus. And you want to observe the same polarity on each of the speakers if you're hooking it up directly to the speaker posts on the back of a speaker, so that the diaphragms are moving in sync with each other and not opposing each other in polarity. So observe, most cable needs to be marked with some type of polarity marker. If you could even use lamp cord if you want to, but lamp cord sometimes is marked with a ribbed connector on one and a non-ribbed non-ribbed on the other, even if both wires are the same color. So make sure that you get the positive from the amplifier to the positive terminal on the speaker and the negative to the negative.
Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, just to add for the last portion of Peter's question, as mentioned by Jeff earlier, microphone connections are you typically want to have balanced connections there. For an output of a DI, a microphone level output of a DI going into a mixer, you'd want a balanced microphone cable there, typically XLR.
Next question.
Sam Rhimes in Maidenhead is up next, and this case the question is, I'm improving my Zoom calling and content creation setup. I want a simple, solid color background behind me. Any recommendations on how to do this?
Samuel?
Yeah, well, what I've done here, I've got a roller blind. If you get like a gray roller blind, or you can get them in different colors, I suppose. And you can just roll it up and down. If there's other options, you can get this photography paper that the photographers use, like a backdrop, and just tear off if it doesn't look too good. You can just tear it off. So that's one option. And then there's also, if you want to get something a little bit nicer, then you can get like I think Manfrotto makes some backdrops that you can put up laser light, I believe.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
So one other thing to think about, the lighting that's going to be hitting your background is almost more important than the color. And I say that because I can put up 4 different colored backgrounds. And if I light my subject brightly such that the background falls off into darkness, all of those can look dark gray or black and have no color on them at all. So the biggest problem most people have in setting up like a desktop system and setting up a background is that they fail to add enough light to light the background evenly, but at a lower level than your subject. Because most cases on these kind of Zoom calls, you want the person to pop out of the background. And so you have to manage that difference between the background light level and the person's foreground light level. So regardless of color, consistency is usually going to be about lighting as opposed to what color the background is. Get a good color background, but then light it well, and you'll have what you're looking for, which is a rich color background.
Nigel?
Yeah, I couldn't move fast enough to get the Manfrotto sizes of the tacos, as I think we've called them before, that fold up into a sort of large circle, although it takes many years of practice to get that folded away. I found that really the best solution. And if I go mobile, I tend to throw that in the car if I can, not obviously flying, because then wherever you are, you have this gray, and you get a choice of gray, black, white, and they're reversible. You get this gray background, which is much easier to light. If it has to be behind a window, it works fine, and is a really, really convenient way. And after enough practice, you can fold it in 10 seconds.
Good, Chris?
So, Sam, my preference is separation. Like, I really want to have, and I could show you real quick. So this is my background lighting, and this is my foreground lighting. And when I'm lighting, I want to have as much separation between the two zones as possible. And I know that, I kind of have deep set, beady, untrustworthy eyes, and so it's not great here. But my lights are very much to the side, and I just have computer screens in front of me. But this lighting technique of being able to separate the foreground and background is also super useful if you're doing green screen, because you're going to get the background will be completely separate from your foreground, and you'll get much less spill.
Yeah, one of the things that I have, so I use a lot of the reversible ones, the Manfrotto 6 foot by 7 foot. I have 3 or 4 of them, and we use them for interviews. We sometimes put them on both people. One thing that makes it easier to mount is this little mount here. So what this is this will go on your C stand, and it's got magnets here, and your background will snap to it. So you just put it on and it will work on a light stand or a C stand, and you just put this on and you roll it up like this. Because one of the biggest problems with those kind of fold out ones that Nigel was talking about is putting it, how do you hang it? Like, what do you attach it to? It turns out magnets work really well. So you put this on, you put it on a light stand, you move it up. And what this means is that you can have this little light stand. It should be a slightly beefy light stand, not like a tiny little one. You put this on, this is just a standard mount that you would have for a C stand. But you can have a light stand, so it's nice and something you can actually put in your car relatively easily. And you just pull this up and snap it on, and snap it off, and it really makes it easy to put up a background and take it down.
They should make half of that thing removable so you can put it in a smaller case.
Well, the problem is you already have a big. You already have the foldable
as long as
thing
that
is already
fits in
huge.
the rolled up taco, sure.
It does. It fits in the roll.
Oh, okay.
The taco is huge, but you don't want to I don't want to usually put it inside of that bag because I don't want to mess up my taco. Anyway, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, there are 2 sizes of those reversible backgrounds. There's a 5x7 and I think a 5x6.
6x7 and a 5x6 or something.
Yeah, don't buy the smaller one.
Yeah, you'll think you want the smaller one, but it's
because the depth that Chris is talking about suddenly becomes almost impossible to do when you bought a very small one.
Man, it's brutal. Like and that's been the problem with even the smaller Elgado green screens that you pull up. The one that pulls up from the ground is just a little too thin. So if you don't have a way to, it's like 5 feet wide or something like that, or 4 feet wide, and it's just really problematic until you get the bigger one that comes down from the top. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. And the question is, what is the panel's current go-to mic for one-time remote guests in interviews where you want them to sound better and don't expect the mic back?
Jeffrey?
If you're sending a mic, you'll also have to think about sending a stand for the mic. You're also going to have to think about if you're doing USB or XLR. If you're doing XLR, you probably need an audio device for that. First of all, just to keep that in mind. MV7 is a great microphone to send. There are cheaper versions. The Rode Pod mic is a $100 microphone. There are some even cheaper versions than that from companies. I remember the first Audio-Technica was a hybrid microphone. It looked like an SM58, and it worked really well for that type of situation. Once again, you need to get them some sort of stand for that. But I know that like Mayono and Saramonic, they're all making microphones that are hybrid, and they're making USB versions, and they're pretty comparable for one-time interviews if you need to save money.
Good guy.
$59, Sennheiser XS Lav USB-C with a 6.5-foot cable. That's what we've been sending out, and don't have to send it back. It's yours to keep.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I've gone the USB Lav route, and that's what I use for my comms here. And I use it on my other laptop over there for Zoom calls where I don't want to sit at the good Stellar X2 workstation. You know, we looked at these Pro AR microphones. These are $79 on Amazon. They're a clone of the AKG 414. Only they're much cheaper, much more cheaply made. It's a single pattern microphone. It's cardioid. Single side pickup. It comes with a stand and a pop filter. Not a stand. It comes with a shock mount and a pop filter. You would have to provide the stand, and it comes with a cable. And I was going to say, that's one of the reasons I ordered this Pile USB interface, because it could be put at the end of that cable. This Pile also has a manual mute button on it, which is great. And the little color thing there changes color when you mute. So it lets you know you've muted, and it's off the microphone, so you're not making mechanical noise to mute it in a Zoom call. It also, the Pile will know. I'll know after I get it in how good it is. This microphone sounds pretty good. I've crossfaded it with the Stellar X2, and people here have said that they really can't hear the difference between it. It is an electret condenser disguised as a true condenser, but it uses 48-volt phantom, and the Pile USB interface does provide it. That Pile interface is $44, and this is $80. So you could get by pretty cheap, and the person will be impressed with the. It looks like a quality microphone and sounds pretty good as well, and it makes a nice gift to a high-profile client.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, earlier in the pandemic for remote voiceover sessions that we had to do while people were in quarantine, we started sending out a bunch of the Audio-Technica AT2020 USB mics. This was before we were able to acquire more mixed pre's to send out. John Ellison had introduced me to the Samson Go mic, which is a pretty darn decent sounding microphone for $30. It's a USB microphone, and yeah, great size and easy to ship around, and again $30. But nowadays I'd probably recommend going with what Jeffrey mentioned, which is the Shure MV7.
Yeah, the MV7, you have to have a pretty good project to be able to let people keep it, but it is a good one to send out as a single use. It actually works as better as a single use because it will start to wear and tear on the USB. It's got a micro USB, and it can only handle so many insertions. so the as compared to a USB-C, and so we noticed that it starts to get a little looser as it gets loaned around a little bit. But the MV7, the big thing for us is that it's really hard to control people's environment. So we really try to do everything we can to get that mic within about 6 inches of their mouth, if not 3 inches from their mouth, with something that's got some off-axis rejection. We stopped. I mean, the problem with labs is they work great in a good environment. They just don't work great when they in a large environment or anything that when you can't control someone's room, and oftentimes they're coming in from their dining room or their kitchen or their whatever it is, and they've got a lot of hard surfaces, and we're really sensitive to reverb. So we really try to, and the problem, that's the thing that we really run into. So getting mics that are really close and have some off-axis rejection are things that we try to pay a lot of attention to. The ones that we've done when we've needed to throw them away, or let them keep them, are these Rode NT USB minis and the Logitech Blue Yeti USBs, and they're not incredible, but they're oftentimes good enough. Really, the challenge is getting the stand where it'll get nice and close to the person. We're really excited about the new Rode stand that I don't think is shipping yet, but and that it looks really good. I don't know if anyone's used it yet, but it looks really nice. It looks shippable. I don't have it right up here, but it looks shippable and very adjustable. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I just recommended a client get an MV7 and the Rode low profile one. He loved it.
Are you talking about the Elgado low profile or the Rode low?
Oh, I apologize. I sent a link to the Elgado.
And for people you're going to work with for a while, or you're recommending it, then we very quickly shift over to like an MV7 is a great one for a lot of folks. One thing that you can do, by the way, that we just learned recently, is that you can order the cap, the foam cap for the SM7B, and then put it on the MV7. Their receiver size is exactly the same, and you'll get a lot less pops. It will eliminate 90% of the popping if you use the SM7B foam, which you can only buy from Shure directly. They have a lot of cheap ones that are on Amazon, and they all stink. So the Amazon knockoffs are not good. The Shure ones are like $15. They'll send them to you, and you put that on the end of your MV7, and it looks like a SM7B after that. But it definitely cuts down on the popping because there's a lot more air between the two. So those are things to think about. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Wilmington, Delaware. ClearCom systems in theaters get really noisy if you touch your Apple laptop. Does the audio panel have any tips to mitigate this? My least favorite feature, brought to you by Apple.
Jeff?
My first question, the first thing to test would be on your charger, are you using the 2-prong charger or are you using the 3-prong grounded adapter cable for that? And I would, whichever one you're using, I would test the other one to see if that mitigates the problem.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. And especially if you're using, and I've bought some of those Chinese knockoff Apple power supplies chargers. They look exactly the same, but they are not exactly the same. And a lot of them generate a lot of hum that will come through the metal of your Mac laptop. So make sure it's an Apple provided power connector. And like Jeff says, plug the 3-prong output in there and make sure that the outlet is grounded. And a good way to check to see if the hum is coming from the power supply is just unplug it and let it run off the batteries. If the hum goes away, that's where your hum is coming in from the power supply.
Jeffrey?
Also think about anti-static armbands and see if that will help with making sure that when you touch the laptop, it doesn't work. You can also get mats that you can put down on the table that will help with any type of conductivity.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says, companies are moving away from cloud computing at AWS, Microsoft, and so forth, going back to in-house being physical presence in a local DC using cloud stuff like OpenShift, Terraform, and so forth. You guys seeing that? Thoughts?
Nigel?
Not really. I think what you're seeing is an early set of people who outsourced because they thought it would be cheaper and did it purely for price, thinking that they've lost the flexibility they need. When you outsource for flexibility, when people use those cloud services and think through, and Guy talked about the way he used some of these earlier, and you think about it flexibly and you think about it in your work stream, you tend to leave it out there because it's a CapEx versus OpEx conversation. But if really you just did it because you thought it was cheaper, you'll find you have to bring it back in-house, reintegrate it, and then think about where it should best live.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin coming to us next. Using an i9 laptop with RTX 4070, how many parallel 1080p encodes, streams and or recordings, should this machine be able to handle?
Samuel.
Yeah, I believe you're using this machine for vMix, and vMix actually uses the GPU. And recently they've opened, vMix has opened up, or not vMix, but NVIDIA has opened up so you can use a lot more encodes at the same time. Before it was limited to 2, and then they added it to 3. Now I think it's unlimited, but you definitely don't want to encode more than you need to from one laptop. So I would say I wouldn't be comfortable of doing more than 3 or 4 at the most.
Mickey?
Yeah, I think this would vary a lot depending on what the codec you're encoding to, H.264, H.265, or even in intraframe codecs, and also what bitrate you're encoding at and the frame rate. So you can, in case you're encoding to H.264 or H.265, you can do the math on the number of encode cores the RTX 4070 has. But the best way to really know is to run tests, a lot of tests.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, a lot of times I will do external recordings. I will do external streams, going to another machine that will actually stream it out, another machine that will record it. Even though it's a very beefy machine, it's still a laptop. And so a desktop would be even beefier, and I'd still get an external recorder and external streamer. At most I'd do 2 if I'm doing just a stream and a record. But if I'm doing both, I definitely want to make sure that I have something that if everything crashes, at least the stream doesn't crash.
Courtney?
And I would check to see what your encoder software is using for its encoding, because on the i9, it has QuickSync, which all Intel chips in the last 5 or 6 years have, which is a separate H.264 and H.265 encoder that's built into the chip itself. It's not part of the GPU, the internal Intel GPU. And of course, you can encode with the RTX 4090. So if your software just says use GPU or use CPU, make sure it's defaulting to the GPU in the RTX rather than to the one that's on the chip in the i9. The i9, I think, can encode 2 streams easily with QuickSync, and then the RTX, I think, can do quite a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, the way we like to do it is just to delegate machines to do certain tasks. And so even though you have a fancy, super hot rod computer, you want to watch those task manager percentages and see if you're maxing things out. Once you get over like 60%, well, especially in vMix, if you're watching that CPU load down and GPU load down in vMix and you start to see it coming over 60%, you're starting to risk a failure. So I would recommend offsetting the records and the streams onto different machines, or just watch that load. If you do want to try and do it all on one, really watch that load and monitor and see if it's going over 60. If it is, then I would suggest going to a second machine, either for the stream or for the records.
Yeah, software like vMix and Mimo and TriCasters and everything else are very, very powerful and very, very flexible. The danger really is that you can ask the computer to do more than it can. They have the ability to keep on the elasticity and the flexibility that you like allows them to flex into those things. And so what you need to do is definitely do all the things that are the most challenging. So when you design your system, as Mickey said, test often, trust but verify. And the main thing you're looking for is you have that window. I design the system around 40% capacity, hoping, and I worry when it goes over 60. And so you're looking at, and now what should you be testing? You should be testing, I'm doing stuff with a lot of, moving windows. So multi-views or super sources, however you want to call them. Those are animated. So I have animated with, let's say, 4 videos that are moving around. So you're animating those, and each one of those is what we would call a widowmaker, which is video of the ocean, video of things that are with lots of pixels moving all at the same time. So each one of those it looks like that, and usually there'll be different ones. You don't want to give it any opportunity to make copies. And so you have 4 separate sources that are very, very difficult. You animate them over that. And then you encode, and then look at your CPU usage and your GPU usage and see if it's at 40%. And when it goes over 40%, stop designing. Because you still need a lot of headroom because other things will happen on top of that. But if you do those things, you start adding your encodes at that point, you're going to be, you can figure out pretty quickly. My guess is it will be 1 or 2. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Fenwick in Emeryville, California. Guy, Riverside and Final Cut Pro 10. What? No way.
God, Guy.
I'm just testing it. So I noticed the option here right in the bottom. Let's see, right over here. It says export all, and then you have export, and it says download tracks or Premiere Pro and Final Cut. And I have it expanding right now, a 10 gig.
So
this one was 10 gigs.
Ever since you said that, I went bonkers. So I found it as well. What I found was that it, let me see. It gave me, God, what's going on over here? Never mind. It gave me access to both, to all the files. It made an XML package. Sorry, okay. It made an XML package with the 2 video tracks, the 2 WAV files, and the XML. On my particular one of the guys actually had a 4K camera, so I got him at 4K. He looked great. The other guy's 1080. He looks pretty good too. In terms of what it gave me in Final Cut was it gave me a timeline with the 2 guys stacked, didn't do any editing, and it gave me the 2 synced WAV files. What's interesting about the thing, and maybe this is to come, is Riverside has this whole edit page where you can go through and look at the text and say, yep, delete that, delete that, delete that. Very fancy, very modern. But the export doesn't exist on that page. That would be cool because then I could bring it into my editor, whichever one you want to use, and then diddle fiddle, make it a little nicer. But maybe that's
cool. I did see markers in there. So if you have that business plan, you can use markers and have the client kind of rough it out for you and say, cut here, cut here.
Correct.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is another QR code question. I'm trying to figure out some fake blood recipes, wondering if the team at Office Hours Global know what was used on the Dexter TV show, or maybe the first Nightmare on Elm Street.
Funny fact, Courtney and I actually first met on the Dexter TV set. So anyway, go ahead, Courtney. You might know a little about this.
There's a number of commercially available cinema blood formulas available. You can look. Here's one from Ben Nye. I can't remember whether we made our own or we just bought these off the shelf. Real Effects makes some called Stage Blood. It's easier to buy. You can buy it by the gallon. One cute thing that we did do on Dexter, because a lot of times we go into a location and you don't want to. A lot of this stuff will stain rugs or anything that you pour it onto. And there's different formulas for different types that there's types that are made with like a clear Kairos syrup, corn syrup that they put food coloring in. So if it has to be used in the mouth, it's not, non-toxic and it's sweet tasting. It's not awful tasting. So if you have to be spitting blood, that's the kind they use. One thing they found this urethane, this hardening urethane with a hardener in it. And they pour it out onto a cement floor or onto a wax paper covered floor, and it hardens. And it looks like a pool of blood. It's shiny, it has the glossy, and it looks just like wet blood and pooled up on the ground. Then you peel it up, and then you can just throw it on the top of any floor and do your scene with this pool of blood lying by the body, and then just pick it up and carry it back to the prop house, and it leaves no marks behind because it's solid.
I actually saw that. That was there was a prop room, and I walked in and I was like, whoa! And there was like just blood
on the floor, and you go, ooh, somebody needs to clean that up. Yeah, well, exactly. You pick it up. It's like, oh, it's okay.
It was really good. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
One thing to consider from my stage days, we used a certain type of stage blood with sugar in it, and it caused a reaction on one of the players. So that's one of the things that you want to put into consideration when you're making blood is how it's going to react, how people are going to, especially if it's going to be in a mouth or something like that, how they're going to react to it. So do a lot of testing.
Yeah, and why do that testing? While it may not be toxic, it's going to have a horrible impact on your glycemic index. so you got to make sure that there's a lot of sugar in there. It's because it's mostly the stuff that we've made in the past has mostly been some form of a corn syrup with
corn syrup with food coloring. Yeah,
food coloring.
But then you get finished so much sooner that day because everybody's on a sugar rush.
Yeah, exactly. but you have to finish quickly, otherwise they'll get off that rush and then it's horrible. That's why we never give people M&Ms until 4:00 in the afternoon, 2 hours before the end. That's your little bump, and then we get you to the end of the show. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, up next. Any opinion on the Opal C1? Any better than the Elgado Facecam or the Logitech?
I would actually say it's better than both of those. It is. I haven't tried the new Logitech, so when you say Logitech, I'm assuming you're saying a Brio. The Opal C1 is actually pretty good, and I would say that it's probably better than both of those. I just wouldn't use it. I think that for a lot of the stuff we do, we don't really consider that to be a valid option anymore. Like, we don't really use webcams for most of the shows that we do at this point. But it is better than both of those cameras. Coming up on Friday, by the way, Tenacious Ventures Studio Tour. We're really excited about this. So we're going to be touring this great studio that Guy hooked us onto. So we're very, very excited. So make sure to come Friday to see that tour there. Of course, we have the weekend Q&A on Saturday and our more introspective Sunday. And we also have Ruthless Reviews on Saturday morning. So at 9 o'clock after the show. This is our 5th Saturday. Welcome back to the second hour, and now we're going to talk a little bit about ear training. And the thing that's important is that it's one thing that we can tell you how to fix things, but oftentimes it's important for you to know what they sound like. Because a lot of us, when we listen to something, we can go, oh, this, I know what that is. That's comb filtering, or that's reverb, or that's too much, that's self-noise inside the system. That is a grounding problem. These are all things that a lot of us who have seen those things can or have experienced them and fixed them have been able to can identify relatively quickly when we hear it. So what we thought would be useful to do is listen to some of these artifacts and then really talk to what you're hearing, and then also how to fix it. And what I'm going to do to get this kicked off is hand it off to Jeff. Jeff, take it away.
Sorry, just looking for that unmute button there. So I actually, the remotes were talking yesterday and talking about our songs that are slowly moving along, but a bunch of audio guys on there. We all love audio, so I was like, what problems should we think about? So ear training is such a broad thing. It can be musical ear training, but I think we're more focused on audio ear training. And so they were throwing out things like, hearing a ground loop 60 hertz or 50 if you're in other parts of the world, hearing over proximity effect, hearing distortion or clipping, hearing phase problems, which is most often shows as comb filtering, hearing echo, hearing things on the verge of feedback, the ring that happens when something's getting close to the point where the gain is too high and it's going to feedback, hearing RF interference, those kind of things, gain staging problems. So it was a whole laundry list, dropouts, digital ticks, those kind of things. So I quickly looked through and found I have some examples of some of this. So a lot of these I prepared for intro audio students to begin to hear problems. Some of these are in stereo, so you'll need to be listening in stereo to hear them. And the way I set them up is that they start with normal audio and they switch to the bad audio. So maybe that's helpful to hear things that change. Not all of them do that, but let's start with this one. So this is going to change from stereo to mono partway through it. Let me turn on the audio.
Not hearing anything yet.
Hear noise.
Did you hear that one?
Yes.
Yes. Did you hear it switch to mono?
I really didn't, but I've got not the best stereo monitor.
I came in late, so I'm not sure when it switched. My headphones.
And what it'll do is it'll feel very much more spacious, and suddenly it feels like it's coming right down the middle.
Let's try this one, which should be normal audio, and then go to comb filter.
It sounds like it's in a tunnel.
Okay, so it sounds like that one worked.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
very
certainly.
noticeable
Yeah.
to me.
So comb filtering is at any time when you have one piece of audio mixed with another piece of audio that is very similar to it, and it might not be exactly, these are exact duplicates of each other, with a slight time of arrival, slight delay between them. So comb filtering is something that happens acoustically out in the real world, but also happens digitally or electronically through our gear. So if you have latency through something and you get the original audio and you have late audio, if it's a very short delay, those will cause this comb filtering sound, which is a phasing issue. It's a time issue, and so certain frequencies that time ends up being a full cycle late, or 2 cycles late, or 3 cycles late, and so they add on top of each other. And some of them end up a half a cycle out, and so they'll cancel each other. And in between, there's various amounts of constructive interference getting louder and destructive interference canceling each other. And so we get this strange EQ response where we get, if you imagine the response of the EQ looks like a comb, because it goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down all the way up to higher frequencies. And it's really difficult to remove that. Now, comb filtering will happen if you have something reflective right around you. So, if I pick up my iPad and move it closer to my face, you probably hear the quality of my voice change in the way I'm talking, because the reflections of that iPad are bouncing into the microphone. And so that is a time delay. That coloration it's coming in late, so that's phasing issues. That's comb filtering. Questions about that one when we talk about it?
It's really interesting. I think that one of the things that I think there's the signal and what we hear from the signal, and these are the self noise, the grounding loops, but there is so much about the environment that a lot of times we don't realize. One of the things that you'll when I walk into a room, I think we've talked about this in previous shows. When I walk into a room that I haven't worked in yet, that I'm going to work in, you'll hear me go, and I'm just listening. I'm just listening to what the room's going to do, and then because I can't design anything out, until I know what it sounds like, and after a while you get kind of used to that. But I think that to the point you're making, a lot of the things changing, that quality is, I think people think, well, I got a good mic, it should sound good. But the entire environment impacts, how that sounds, and understanding what that means. And I think it's really fascinating what you're showing there is, even just the screens that we have around us affect us, affect what we sound like. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Courtney.
absolutely.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
So I find it's easiest to train your ear for this on what's kind of the worst case, which you create in a DAW by taking a piece of audio and then duplicating it and moving it later in time with a delay, or just sliding it into the DAW and mixing those two together, because the worst case is going to be exactly the same audio at exactly the same level with just a slight time arrival difference. And we're talking about basically 15 milliseconds or less. You get beyond 15, 20, 25 milliseconds, and now it begins to be that you can start to hear it more as an echo, depending on the audio. If it's very transient drum, percussive, rhythmic audio, that's closer to 20 milliseconds. If it's very sustained pads, then it's going to be closer to 35 or 40 milliseconds. But those longer times you'll hear as an actual an echo or a flam, a doubling of things. But when it's very short, 10 milliseconds or less, then we're going to get this comb filtering. And that's where a lot of latencies fall. And so you'll hear this if you have on your interface, if you have a USB audio interface, if you have the ability to mix in your original sound and also hear yourself back through the software, you'll hear 2 pieces of audio, and that will sometimes give this comb filtering. I'm going to play just another example, hopefully, so in case you didn't hear the first one, this one's a little more obvious.
you can definitely hear that. As you kind of go into the cave. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I've also learned and trained my ears to detect, which is something a lot of people don't really realize, is cold water pipes that are running through a room, through the walls. I can go into a room, even if there's nothing in the room, or if it has soft padded walls, and clap my hands, and any concussive sound, you'll hear a ringing, like a metallic bing, coming from any of the walls that have standing water pipes in them they're full of water, like cold water feed pipes. And that can actually affect your sound in a room. So I try and avoid rooms that have that. And if I'm going to do any kind of percussive sound in that recording in that room.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So this is something that I had to really learn in the field, and it was tough for me at first because I didn't know what to listen for. And then the things that are talking about today, the positioning of mics, I never realized how, I guess the fiddly is not the right word, but when somebody is miking something like an acoustic guitar, they can be very precise about moving the mic 3 inches this way or 3 inches that way. And it's trying to solve these kinds of things like multipath. I'll never forget the first time I was in a situation where I had to film a romantic scene between the two lead characters, and they were both wearing lavs. And as they came together, the nature of the sound as they got within a foot of each other just radically changed. And I was going, what happened? Why is my sound so terrible for a moment? And then they finally got into the clinch, and we had clothing problems and the rest of that. But that is this comb filtering thing happening in real time and really damaging what you can do. And it caused me after that day to always have an overhead boom on those kind of shoots, in addition to the lavs on the people that are changing their orientation to each other and to the sound mix.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so like I said, Bill, you gave a great example of the next stage of listening to that. So the first one is listening to it, where you can control things and make the comb filtering the worst case, and then you begin to see it out in the real world. So two microphones, when those two actors came together, both of their microphones are picking both of them up closer in level to each other. When they're standing far apart, the mic that's on the actor is picking them up much louder than the one across the room. But when they get close together, now those two are getting closer in level, and you begin to hear that comb filtering. And about 10 dB, if you can get the later sound, the reflections, the delay, whatever it is, if you can get the reflections 10 dB quieter, it tends to get less noticeable. So we have to get similar in level. And yeah, I hear this all the time in live theater, because if all the actors are mic'd, when they come together, someone has to be really on their toes to turn one of the actors' mics off and let one actor's mic pick up both of them. They're constantly riding faders. I hear it even if someone is in a scene and they have to read from a book. If they hold the book too close to their face, you hear the reflections off the page. Another place that I see this all the time is in houses of worship or any kind of place where there's a lectern and a lectern mic. And so you have a lay person that goes up to speak, and they're not wired with a headset or a lav. And so they go up to talk, and they're amplified through the gooseneck podium mic. And then the pastor comes up to speak, and he's got a headset mic on. And now we have someone is left on the gooseneck mic, and now there are two paths for the pastor's sound to get out into the PA, and they are two different differences. And the worst thing is that if the pastor moves, the headset mic doesn't change its distance. But if they move their distance from the gooseneck mic, then that whole set of filters sweeps up and down the band, and you've created comb filtering that is changing, and so you basically created a flanger by moving back and forth actively.
And that's why I think it's so important for us to understand what we're listening to and what we're seeing, and understanding how sound works, because a lot of times you have folks that are volunteering for a lot of the smaller house of worships, and they're not trained in those things, and they don't know what they're listening to. They know it's wrong. Well, sometimes they don't know it's wrong, but oftentimes they know that something doesn't sound as good as it could, but they don't know what to do about it. I think that's and they don't know the actions. So I think that's why this is so valuable. Jeff, do you have any other examples you'd like to play for us?
Sure. So this one should be a fairly obvious problem. This was a live orchestra with mic'd singer. So this is just the direct feed of the singer's wireless mic, and you can hear all kinds of whine that gets into the RF signal there.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go.
Would that one come through?
Yes, let my frequencies
100%.
go. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of high frequency.
And so that's a transmitter or a RF problem.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's the fix?
Well, the fix is working on RF frequencies if you have the time to do that. The problem with RF is that sometimes in rehearsal, the thing that's interfering wasn't active. And now the show pops up and the thing that is interfering is all of a sudden turns on, and there's not time because we're already live. So in the moment, it was trying to EQ out some of those frequencies, so a very narrow notch filter, and then judicious gain riding, that basically in between phrases that mic is pulled down so that while they're singing, hopefully it's not obvious that the sound is there. In post, that track can be run in through something where we can be much more accurate about notching out those frequencies, potentially an iZotope that would be used on that track.
Yeah, and the one of the things is that the other thing I like to do is when I'm listening to things that are wrong, one of the things I really want to do is see scopes, see my audio scopes. What does this look like on a spectrogram or spectrograph? Because then what happens is that you're working on a bunch of things. I can look up, a lot of times I'm streaming, 4 rooms, 8 rooms, 20 rooms at the same time. I can't listen to all of them, but I can look across the screens very, very quickly and go, that one has a ground loop, or this one's too low, or this one's got this, because I can see it on the scopes and I can see what that looks like. But a lot of times when I'm listening and I hear something that I know, oh, this is wrong, I immediately want to see it on a scope so that I understand what does that sound look like over here as well. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and especially if you could put that individual mic feed up to that scope, because in the mix you'll see it, but it'll be much more minor. But if you can just solo out that to the scope and see those, that would really be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, just to add to the sample that Jeff just played out with RF interference, you would get that with traditional analog wireless mics, but not so much in digital systems.
Absolutely. Go, Courtney.
Yeah, right. What Mickey said is right. The front end on an analog wireless mic, if it's a poorly designed front end, doesn't eliminate a lot of that RF beat frequencies that come from your carriers. The other thing you can do is to carry a dummy plug that will plug into the input of your wireless transmitter and just put a resistive shunt on it to ground it, to see if that RF noise is coming from the mic input or if it's coming from your receiver decoding. So it's in the receiver's electronics. So regardless of what you do to try and eliminate it, like a better shielded wire on the lav cable, etc., it could be coming in at the receiver and not coming in from the transmitter. So that's a good troubleshooting method to determine where that high frequency is coming from.
And this is why frequency coordinators are so important. For in a lot of our professional environments of making sure that everybody theoretically where everybody is to make sure that works. Do you have some more for us, Jeff?
Yeah, this is a same show, I believe. This venue has since upgraded to digital wireless. This one, I think it's especially, well, I don't want to kill you with cranking the gain of that channel, sorry. This one that...
Oh, can't hear you. I think you might have potted yourself down.
I muted myself too early. I'm muting myself when I'm playing the excerpts. Right. But towards the end of this 15-second excerpt, you should hear some ground loop hum.
Couldn't bear it without you, awfully different without you. Don't get around much much anymore.
I hear it.
Yeah.
And can you talk about the causes of the ground loop hum?
So generally, ground loops are when there are two paths. So everything that we have electronically, we want to be grounded. Now, grounding is for several different reasons. It's a reference point that all of our audio references to, so our audio goes positive and negative above and below that ground reference. It's also a safety issue because if the chassis of the box of some device were to become accidentally electrified with the line voltage coming from your power company and you walk over to touch it, you become the path to ground, and that's really dangerous. So one of the purposes of that third pin, the safety pin ground on your power plug, is to connect that chassis to ground so that if the box, the chassis of a device does become electrified, it will draw tons of current and your circuit breaker will trip immediately, shutting that off. And so that's called safety ground. And then, so the way people solve this wrong, which is incredibly dangerous, is chopping off or defeating that third pin. What causes ground loops is if two devices in your audio system are plugged in to two circuits that happen to have a different impedance to ground and therefore have a slightly different ground voltage. Now you have a differential, if there's a voltage differential, you get a flow of current. And that
ground
current
will always
come,
go to the easiest way, right? It'll always take the easiest way back.
Yes. But if one outlet on one side of your studio, the ground is a volt higher than the ground on the other side of your studio, those still are functioning as perfectly good grounds. They're providing safety. But the problem is that if you have audio connected between them and the shield in your audio cable is connected at both ends, now there's another path for that 1 volt differential to flow, and it's flowing through the shield that goes around your audio cable. And so that will often induce, through induction, not through wires that are touching, but through an electromagnetic field that is created and then picked up, it will induce that sound in your audio. And the simple way to correct that is to remove the shield connection at one end. Shield, in order to work, a shield's job is to take all the electromagnetic interference in the world and shunt it to ground so it doesn't get into your audio. It only needs to be connected to ground in one place. It doesn't need to be corrected at both ends. So we can disconnect the shield, and that will solve that problem generally, provided everything else is working correctly. It's all about impedance of that to ground.
And I will say that the grounds are one of the most, ground loops are probably one of the most prevalent in events. Maybe not music, but in events, the number one thing that we hear is ground loop. And it can be, also be poor cabling, right? I mean, it's just a poor cable can have a shield problem, and then that leads to a ground loop. I know that my daughter was in a concert, and she literally got up and unplugged. She made everyone stop for a second between songs or whatever, got up, swapped her personal cable, and out for the school cable. And immediately the buzz went away. It was, but you could hear the buzz, and you could tell that it was not going to go anywhere until the cable was replaced. But that's also understanding what it is. Sorry?
Proud moment as a father, was that?
I spent a lot of money on that cable. I was really excited that it was. So anyway, go ahead, Bill.
So I just wanted to double down on the safety aspects of this. I will never forget when I was really young, probably 16 or 17, I decided to go out to one of the boondockers. That's what they used to call these impromptu little parties in the desert. Somebody would go out there. They'd hire the local kids to play their electric guitars, and somebody would always bring a generator out there and had no idea what they were doing. And I'll never forget almost having electrocuted people on stage. I had nothing to do with putting this on. I was way too young for that. But literally not grounding the generator practically came very close to really hurting a bunch of people. And if nothing else, I came away from that understanding that particularly if you're on an event and you're using generators or you're anywhere else that you're not absolutely sure that the wiring is correct, there are a lot of test devices to make sure that grounds are intact and working correctly, and that is one step away from literally a problem that can kill someone. So it's super important.
Courtney?
Yeah, Bill's right. I was going to mention the generator thing too, because a lot of times they'll bring in an external generator for lighting. And I usually try and power all equipment that's going to, audio-visual equipment that's going to be connected together off of the wall plugs in the house rather than the generator that's used for lighting, because frequently, as Bill said, they don't drive a ground rod into the ground for the generator, and even though they have grounded plugs on all of those generator outputs, they are not necessarily grounded. Or if they are, they're grounded to a different, it's a different path to ground than the one inside. So you want to gather together all of your equipment that's going to be connected together via audio or video cables. You wanted to have all that equipment have the same common ground. So if you can, source the AC for all of that equipment from the same plug and or from the same generator if you have to plug into a generator, so that you're not splitting power across two different suppliers of energy. And another way to guard against electrical shock is ground fault interrupters, which is GFI sockets, which are generally available, which will automatically detect a voltage differential between the grounds and automatically disconnect the hot lead if it senses any fault to ground from hot. That will protect you against electrocution. However, it will kill all of your equipment when it disconnects. So a faulty disconnect, if it detects a ground fault, can be problematic in production, but it is a safety feature.
Anything else you'd like to show us, Jeff?
Sure thing. It sounds like we may want to add a second hour about power and power safety.
We've had a second hour
generators
about power and power safety, but you can't have too many of them. Definitely.
Okay, so this one I believe is mono audio, same audio, and it may actually be stereo audio. So you should hear something that's stereo, and then partway through, one of the channels inverts polarity. So if you're listening in mono, you should hear things it won't go completely away, but you will certainly lose, all the center related things. And that's certainly going to be much easier to hear in mono, because in headphones, it's harder to hear that polarity change. It should sound like something's, it kind of centered in front of you, or at least inside your head, and then flip to kind of outside your head. I have a second example of that if we want to run that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another place where scopes would be really handy, because if you're looking at some kind of stereo scope, a phase scope or a Lisa-Jus pattern, you can see things. Even if it's a stereo program, you should see it. Lisa-Jus or phase scope shows. Yeah, shows.
And with a Lisa-Jus scope, you'll see this kind of, if it's stereo, it'll look like that. If it is, if both channels are identical, it'll just have a straight line going up and down. But as soon as you have a polarity issue, you end up with something that looks like that. Oops, I just accidentally did, but something going to the side like that. And it's really easy to see on a scope that you're in trouble. So it just goes, it turns to the side. And then you know that, and we got very focused on that because we had a show where the volume was a little low on one side. And so we kept on saying, hey, can you fix the right channel? It's a little off. And they didn't fix it until like the day of the show. And then they fixed it. And when they matched the two of them, they exposed an issue, which was, and we were having trouble with volume as well, but we didn't really realize what we were listening to. They had the convenience panel, the panel that you plug everything into. Someone had miswired the one feed for one channel to us. And so what happened was that that as soon as they got the volume correct on both of those, it canceled out. But only, as Jeff pointed out, only on phones if you're watching without a headset, because it was summing. So as soon as it summed the two to mono, it eliminated the audio. So people are complaining on the show going, hey, I can't hear the show. And we're listening to it on the headphones going, we can hear it just fine. And it was a hard thing to kind of travel down. And I mean, it all got sorted in 10 or 12 minutes, but that's 10 or 12 minutes in a keynote. People are, tweaked. And so we built a whole protocol that unless you're playing music, unless you tell us you're playing music, we would copy the right channel. We'd copy the left channel to the right channel in the encoder. Like at the very end, we're just going, we're going to copy these two. And you're not going to get, there's not going to be any stereo unless you tell us that music is important. Go ahead, Mickey.
So yeah, I think another good thing, I was going to demo this, but I realized the version of Zoom that I'm using has original sound permanently on. But one thing that people should probably learn to detect or listen for is noise suppression and too much noise suppression. That's especially important with what a lot of the folks in the community do, which is bring in presenters or contributors via a Zoom session. So one thing to listen for that is if, say, you start to hear not a voice that doesn't sound like it's full fidelity from, especially if you're familiar with the microphone that they're using, you start to hear it first. If it's a really noisy environment and Zoom's noise suppression is doing a lot of work, you start to lose your high end, and you also start to lose low end. So it sounds very mid-rangey, almost like a POTS telephone call. Another thing to listen for is like over compression, too much dynamic range compression on a microphone feed. So like if I turn on a compressor here and I start to compress my voice and I'm going to continue speaking, I am speaking into an AKG 414, going into a Sound Devices 7440, going through a whole bunch of stuff. You should hear my voice sounding a lot, very, very, very much compressed dynamic range wise. So this is what compression or too much compression on, especially on someone's voice, sounds like. And if I turn this off, you can hear the difference in how loud I'm coming through, and also how much dynamic range is being removed out of the signal chain. Now there are situations wherein you may want a bit of dynamic range compression to tame the peaks, but it is very easy to make your listeners fatigued in terms of like listening to the show or listening to your broadcast.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing there or one of the important things of what Mickey said was how much we work on trying to have the most natural, a mic with an environment, with the quietest environment, with as little processing as possible. Because the closer we get to no processing, the more natural it feels, and the longer someone can listen comfortably to it. Where we get, where you have the right, the right way to manage that, as opposed to, constantly. And you can filter a lot of those things out. The question is whether, how does it impact the listener there? Go ahead, Jeff. Did you have something else you wanted to add there?
Well, the overcompressed example, I relate that to, typing in all caps. It's kind of like you're just shouting and everything is at the same level. And much like comb filtering, it's hard to remove or nearly impossible to remove this once the damage is done. So being able to identify it and go to the root of the problem, rather than thinking, oh, I'll fix that later. Bill's example about comb filtering, we could remix those two actors and lower, gain ride one of their mics. But if we get something that's overcompressed, if we get comb filtering that's baked into the signal, there's no EQ that is going to EQ out comb filtering. Once it's there, it's there.
Do you have anything else you'd like to play for us?
So one of the things besides hearing polarity inversion is a channel imbalance. So this is starts with the channels left and right balanced and then a slight shift in level. So you should hear the image move to one side. So that's a pretty subtle shift. Should have gone to the left slightly on that. And that's something that you just want to be able to identify when the stereo is not equally balanced. And again, something you would see on a scope.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I think is interesting is how we have to think about this also on what orientation someone's watching your show. If you're doing a live event, I saw an example of this that I didn't expect on, of all things, TikTok. There's this new thing where people are putting videos up and say, turn your phone to landscape. And when you turn your iPhone to landscape, at least the newer ones, it will immediately go, oh, you want to use both speakers. And you hear this, it goes back and forth. So it's totally mono when it's vertical. And as soon as you turn it horizontal, you suddenly get this surround. And I think that one of the things that, and we've talked about surround a little bit in the past, is that Apple and Dolby have spent a lot of time thinking pretty hard about, time of flight as well as the volume to tell you where that sound is coming from. And a lot of those imbalances can, imbalances as well as timing can really affect how that occurs. Did you have anything else, Jeff, that you wanted to show?
So this is a really subtle one. So this was a small digital tick on a few tracks, and I've got a rough mix of this. It's a quartet of sort of bluegrass. It's only a 3-second excerpt, so you'll hear the tick in the mix. And then I isolated one track where the tick was the worst. And this was an isolated single little problem, which is good to be able to identify. So I'll play the mix twice, and then I'll play the individual track twice.
What was it?
So, Jeff, was that just a little transient dropout or something? What was
I didn't do the recording. This came to me, and someone else had asked me to go through the edits and do a little fixes on that. So that to me just sounds like some kind of little digital glitch.
Yeah, we find that there's a couple things there. That can be, for us, that can be some kind of clocking issue between different devices. So that's the most common problem that we see with that. But the other one is small digital dropouts. So we've that clicking that we've heard. So the interesting thing is that you heard it on strings. You hear it on strings more. So I have a test pattern that I'm working on right now, actually. And I'm putting violins into 4 channels. And it took me a little while to find 4, like a combined thing of different, actually it's not all violins, it's all string instruments though, because string instruments will show this much faster than anything else out there. So long, and there's something, for me, it's actually better than tone. Like there's something about that analog, that it's better than just doing a tone. It's also a lot easier to listen to in a theater. And so you hear these strings going out, and they'll pick up all of those little digital dropouts. And a lot of people that when I say I'm going to run that test, a lot of people that are running encodes are really uncomfortable with that test, because it really interrogates the signal. And so we run these strings through all the channels, or all the major channels. And you're able to hear if there's any kind of digital dropouts, because it's a really common thing with encoding, and it's so small, the bit loss is so small that you will not see it. You will not lose a frame of video, but you will lose just enough audio to hear a click. And so a lot of times, and that's the same thing with the timing issues that we run into, is that or the clock issues, is that you hear it's not enough to lose a frame, but it's enough for you to hear it. And it's just because there's an incongruity in the wavelength, or the waveform has got a little cave in it, just enough to create that click. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so even, if we're at 48K, if there is one sample out of place, you will hear the tiniest little.
Yep.
And I had, and I don't have the recording of this. We didn't record as we were solving this problem, but this was a live streaming, and Audio Village was shipping over audio to be embedded into Video Village. And we wanted to, in the past we've gone analog, And we went back to analog because someone ran Cat5 over, and we connected to Dante, and it was all working. And then as I'm listening, and it was string quartet, I'm hearing tiny little ticks throughout it. And what it went in, looked at Dante controller, looked at that, we had a Avio at our end in Video Village, and it was turning Dante back into analog audio to be embedded. And we looked at the errors in the Ethernet port of that Avio, and it was having Ethernet errors. And then we looked at the snake that had been run, and it was 150 meter Cat5.
Yeah. Cat5. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and it had it had some EtherCon adapters at both ends to go then into short tails. So there was a couple of connections in between the switch and the Avio, and we were just getting small Ethernet errors that were causing small dropouts, and continuous going on through the program. So once we heard that, back to analog. So that's the thing to watch out for. Is they can be very, very subtle, those little digital ticks.
And again, as you pointed out, they show up in strings faster than almost anything else out there because of that continuous tone tends to grab onto those. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Jeff, when you encounter one of these little digital transients and things like that, what's your strategy usually for fixing in your NLE or in your audio DAW? Do you look for something just before or just after to cover it? I mean, obviously you can't take it out because you'll mess with the time pace a little bit. So what is your strategy for fixing them?
If it's purely one sample that's out of place, Pro Tools allows you to go down to the sample level, and with the pencil tool, you can redraw the waveform. So there are times when I will literally just draw across that, following the slope of what's there. But most often, iZotope, using spectral repair and iZotope is the solution, because it will interpolate from what is before and after.
Yeah, that was my question. For us, it's harder on the video side because we only have 30 frames a second. And if you've got one frame that has bad audio in it, cloning it from somewhere is usually visually not good. So we're trying to figure out how to repair something that's a faster problem than the actual frame rate I'm working at.
It's called, I don't know what it's called in audio. In motion capture, that fix is called a Butterworth filter. It's probably hidden inside. It literally is the Butterworth algorithm is how we get rid of those ticks. I wouldn't be surprised if audio uses the exact same thing for those samples. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to demonstrate that, like, this isn't necessarily a click, but in Pro Tools we typically you would usually notice a click because it's a sudden deviation from a consistent wave, and that's how we can visually see a click in a waveform. But in
you can create one, Mickey.
Oh yeah, we can create one. I don't know if I have things routed appropriately for you guys to hear this, but like say if we have a waveform that's doing like a nice clean sine wave, and then we have something that's a sharp thing there, you can draw it out within Pro Tools, and that's the traditional way within a DAW how to get rid of a click. But if you need to do a lot of it and you're in a time crunch, yes, you do have to rely on things like iZotope. But I like drawing things manually if time permits. Just going back to the topic of folks dealing with contributors via Zoom or web conferencing platform, something that I always listen out for is if a contributor is either using open speakers or they are feeding Zoom back out to Zoom somehow, and if they have echo cancellation turned off, you would clearly hear the echo coming back to you. But if echo cancellation is in place and doing its work, one way to be able to detect that is if two people speak at the same time within the same breakout room or the same meeting, the person with the open speakers, their mic will be potted down or faded down by echo cancellation, because Zoom is preventing the sound of Zoom to loop back. So the person who has open speakers, their mic will be brought down two people talk at the same time.
That's great. Yeah, go, Jeff.
I just wanted to point out to everyone that the waveform drawing with the pencil tool that Mickey's doing in Pro Tools is destructive. It is one of the few things that writes directly into the audio file and changes your audio file at the sample level. So you are able to undo it. It is in the undo queue, but once you close that session, that is permanently baked in. So we were very used
great
to
responsibility.
Well, that's why it's called Pro Tools and not Amateur Tools.
Very good. Do you have anything else you want to play for us?
I do have a short excerpt that has slight clipping of mic preamps on a choir. So that's one thing we should all be able to identify is distortion. So their first swell got up to a nice healthy level, but didn't peak, and then their second one did clip the mic preamp slightly.
And the digital clipping can be really rough. Is that because it sometimes just kind of cuts everything off. It's gotten better over time. Where it's not quite as grating, but still something. And this is why, for instance, that people give a lot of headroom. A lot of times we wonder why are you recording with so much headroom, but that's just make sure you don't get to that point in real time, right?
Yeah, and that was actually solved or mitigated at least with declip algorithm in iZotope, which lowers the gain below 0 dBFS and then interpolates what the waveform should have been based on the frequency content before and after that clipping.
Right, but obviously it's usually better to gain up than gain down. So, in post, if you have to gain down, but that's a lot of times when a lot of times when we're doing live streams, the hard part you get into with all of this is that the number one complaint that we get with live streaming is it's not loud enough. Like it is literally, and I don't mean by a little, by like it's 95% of the complaints is that it's not loud enough. And so you end up in this situation where, we have a tendency to push it we have it come into our system at a safe level so that we can record it. But as it goes out, we really push it. And then at that point, we're using limiters to protect ourselves from that. But we're, trying to make sure that it goes out at a very high level because we don't, people can always turn it down. A lot of people with their devices can't turn it back up again. But understanding what that sounds like when you miss that mark is important. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly like in a production environment, you would want to set your initial gain stage or your head amps at a nice conservative level where you don't have any chance of clipping at that stage. So you'd probably want somewhere between 10 to 20 dB of headroom there above your peaks coming in, but you control your dynamic range as you go through your processing chain. And get it to the appropriate delivery level. Like for web, different platforms have different standards, but it's usually delivery for web is usually pretty loud compared to say TV or streaming or cinema. When I say streaming, like Netflix and such. But going back to what Jeff was mentioned earlier, some ATD converters and also interfaces have what they call soft clip, wherein there is an above like what they report, what the interface actually delivers to the computer. There's an additional headroom in there, wherein if the interface is set to do so, it will gently compress the top of the peaks and bring it within or below 0 dBFS, adding essentially like a very light limiter / compressor at the very top there.
Go, Jeff.
So Mickey mentioned, coming through the entire chain and worrying about levels. And so I think gain staging is something we've talked about plenty and we need to keep reiterating. So the clipping is when some of the gain staging is off in the too high direction. And then if it's too low in certain parts, we're going to end up with additional noise that is amplified later in the system. So making sure that each section, and if it's a single mic into an interface, that's just setting the preamp gain correctly. But if it's in a bigger audio chain where we have lots of inputs that are being mixed and then going into video and into an encoder, we have a lot of stages of that where we need to continually worry about both our peaks and our noise floor, the tops and the bottoms of the dynamic range, to keep it in the optimal range.
Let's go to the first question.
First one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and Douglas says, how well do apps like Chet work for musical ear training? And he's got a link to it.
Go, Jeff.
So I haven't used Chet, but musical ear training is things like learning being able to identify musical intervals. So, growing up before the apps did this, we all had little common songs that we would use. So like Maria from West Side Story is a sharp 4 or a flat 5, that tritone, things like that we kind of pick up on, so that you can identify musical intervals when they're happening, or identify chords, major, minor chords. And so I think these, I took a brief look at Chet, and I think it looks like a good idea. It's probably a more fun than the ear training I had growing up and going to school.
Next question.
Next one comes from Eric Strand in Essex, Connecticut. The Sony 7506 headphones are classic. What other headphones does the panel like?
Good, Bill.
So first of all, I've been using 7506s for 30 years now, and they have been in very good stead for me. I like the fact that they require low power. They're really good in the field because they tend to have a little presence peak, which lets me hear voices better, which is something I want to do in the field. Interestingly enough, in this situation where I'm doing a lot of my audiobook narrating, I'm seriously thinking about switching headphones just for this, because these are lightweight and they don't have a ton of isolation. Not for sounds coming in, but in this case for sounds I'm monitoring in my headphones, and I do not want that sound picked up by this very sensitive microphone when I'm using the TLM 103. So I'm thinking about looking for more isolation. My point in this is you've got to figure out what you want them for. I'm going to be using two different sets of headphones in two different circumstances because I want the characteristics to be different in those. And I will always use these in the field because I really know them well. I know what they sound like, but I'm beginning to think not probably the perfect choice for sitting here all day long doing audiobooks. That's conditional.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I like the Sony's MV6s, which is the precursor to the 7506. So they take the same replacement ear pads, so you can use those, still available. They're not manufactured anymore, but I think they had a little better transducers in them.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I use 7506s for work, but for leisure, I like using the Audio-Technica M50X and also the Bayer Dynamics DT770. I'm just so used to this, so that's why I stick to this for work. But I find it boring sounding for, like, say, listening to music or enjoying music.
Good, Jeff.
7506s. When I need to have some isolation from outside noise, if I'm doing other work, I prefer open backed. So I like the Sennheiser HD 650s for mixing and noise removal and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I use the 50Xs, the Audio-Technicas. Those are the ones when I'm actually working. So I don't. The Sonys are great, of course, but those are the ones that I tended to use. Next question.
Joaquin Mattis in the Imperial Valley, California. Up next, what is a good way to learn how to hear or identify certain problematic frequencies in a mix without scopes?
Good, Jeff.
So a great way to do this is to play music, your favorite music, through an EQ and turn the one of the parametric bands with a fairly high Q and a fairly high boost and sweep that around, and you begin to recognize those center frequencies. Do I have the skills of, used to be sound engineers, live sound engineers would know the frequencies of a 31 band graphic EQ, and they'd immediately be able to identify, that's, 800 hertz. Do I have the skill to zero in on that? By number, no, but I know general ranges. I haven't found it to be incredibly necessary to know exactly what frequency it is when I'm hearing something, because I can zero in on it fairly quickly. I don't have to be able to identify, A440, 1 kilohertz, those are all familiar.
When Brian Maddox doesn't use a 1K signal, and I can always tell when he's running the signal because it's a lower signal than the 1K. I think it's 800. But every time I hear it, like, you're used to one thing and then suddenly it's different, and I always know that Brian's in the chain. Go ahead, Mickey.
Jeff pretty much covered it, but I'll just demo what he mentioned. So you can bring up the gain on an EQ, make it quite a tight Q. And then you can sweep around and find whatever frequency is bugging you, or what frequency range you want to boost or cut. After some time of doing this, like especially like when you're doing dialogue, you can get a sense of like in what range it would lie. So like if there's some honkiness that I want to take out, like I know it would probably lie somewhere between like 400 or 600, somewhere there. So after some time, you wouldn't need to do a sweep of the frequency range, and you can just find a spot and drag it down there, open up the queue a bit.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Robert Sababity in Poland, and Robert says, in events with interpreters who are working in closed booths with glass in front of them and glass to their sides, the audio is tunnel-like. How does one mitigate this effect?
I go, Mickey.
I would start off with like if an enclosed booth, the reason why I put them in an enclosed booth is to get a better sound, I'd probably redesign the booth because it's not doing its job.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Mic closer to the mouth is the first thing, because you're going to get more direct sound and less indirect sound.
Yeah, good, Bill.
My booth had a problem. It didn't used to be a problem, but I changed from working to one corner of the booth to working to another, and I noticed that things were a little honky or a little more brittle, I guess is the best way to describe it. So I actually bought a panel, an acoustical panel that was rated for that, and hung it over the window because I was facing right at it, and I was getting a bounce off of that window back in the microphone, and that cured it. So I had to add more padding to mask that window reflection.
Good, Courtney.
And if you're constructing the booths, I always suggest putting double pane glass and putting it at a slight angle, like a 12-degree off vertical. And also make sure that there aren't any parallel walls to that glass or a countertop. Put something to cover the countertop, because you can get standing waves in there if you have parallel surfaces. So there's a door with glass in it. Cover that up with something that's sound absorbent, and use a directional microphone like a cardioid, and make sure the back of the cardioid is facing the reflective surface.
Yeah, we've done a couple different things depending on the scale of the event. For some of the more important events, the couple things that we've done is, number one is we point the glass, we put another piece of glass inside. I mean, you can actually order these, like you get there the first day. Most places have glass somewhere in the city, and you can say, I need one this size, and then what we do is we have it pointed up, not down, because we don't, and so we'll just lean it in, and it'll be at a slight angle, and then we insert that into the system. And then the other thing we do is put carpet on there, so as Courtney was talking about covering it, but we find that fine carpet on there is something they don't really notice that much. I mean, it's you can get those at remnants, and then you cut them to scale, and that'll suck up a lot of that sound there. We make sure that there's a carpet below their feet. And then also, oftentimes we will throw moving blankets down the side, like that I use here. That's kind of how I got into this, is that we'll put them in, or if they want it to look nice, we'll put, because we have those windows that you're talking about, and we'll have some fullness in those, and we pull the fullness back around so that we don't pull all the mid frequencies out. So we kind of play with where that fullness sits in those, so that we can get it to a point where we don't have to add bass traps and everything else to it. Then the final thing is, as was stated before, we use SM58s. So they're not the perfect thing, but for an interpreter, they're a lot better than the trash that they're talking into in those headsets. They're just those mics are worthless. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of those, not the optimal sounding interpretation. Like going back to Robert's question, the tunnel-like sound that Robert's describing there or mentioning there is what Jeff talked about at the start of the hour, which is comb filtering, and that's why Jeff demonstrated bringing an iPad close to his mouth, and the reflection on that smooth reflective surface is what causes that comb filtering. If you don't need a window in the booth, don't put a window. It's all with this. A lot of studios like having windows in their booths, but if the ratio of smooth reflective surfaces is too large compared to the rest of the absorptive material in the room, you're fighting a losing battle there. So if it's a small booth, don't put a window in there. You don't need like a visual eye contact.
Next question.
Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas has this one. When all else fails, we reach for iZotope RX. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the various modules?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I think just generally speaking as a whole, audio restoration tools and noise suppression tools, the weakness is people tend to overprocess. And I would rather have a more natural sounding sound that isn't distracting, that doesn't take my mind away from the actual content, than something that dives in and out of being overprocessed and then going back to natural.
Good, Bill.
The danger to things like RX is you'll slap it in your system and you'll use one of the filters just the way it is without tuning it to what you actually need. And I had an experience with my first audiobooks, and Mickey helped me track this down, where one of the things I was using to take out a particular click sound was actually damaging the whole sound of the file. And I didn't realize it at first. So don't just slap it on and think that, all to with the deverb or the declick or something, and just clicking that will take care of it. It won't.
Next question.
Next one comes from Guy Cochran, Seattle. When live streaming an in-house sound plus a broadcast, what are some of the audio tweaks done that are different for the broadcast?
Good, Jeff.
So I'm thinking about this from a house of worship perspective, where oftentimes there are instruments that are louder acoustically, and so they are not mixed into the PA sound, but they do need to be mixed into broadcast, thinking drums and things like that. Also adding in audience or congregational response that's needed, which you would never have in the in-house sound. And then the big amplitude difference between amplified music and spoken word is acceptable for that to be a large difference there in-house, but generally on the stream, you're going to want to bring up the spoken word to match the loud sound of music.
Mickey?
Yeah, Jeff covered a lot of it, and also the massive difference in overall loudness of the mix. You don't really measure mixes for a PA system with loudness measurements like LUFS or what
decibels
metrics that you use for broadcast mixes. Like say if you measure a PA mix, you'd probably land somewhere around like minus 30 LUFS, but a mix that goes out to broadcast, like say for YouTube, YouTube wants minus 14. So there's a massive difference in amplitude there, and getting up to that loud mix for web requires a lot more dynamic range processing.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things we do when we can, it's not always possible, is to get the person mixing the audio for the broadcast out of the space. So we did one for a big rock band at a stadium, and the mix for the stream was a Pro Tools rig that was probably 100 feet outside of the stadium. so everything ran back to them, and then they mixed it, and they didn't hear any part of it. They didn't hear the concert at all, and that makes a great mix. When the person is doing the mix is not hearing what's going on in the room, they're going to be able to focus on what does this actually sound like for the broadcast. And it is the biggest thing that there's all these tweaks that you can do, but the biggest thing that makes a difference is being able to hear it, being able to hear what's actually going out. That's why it's very hard to do a web audio mix from the same mixer that you're doing the in-room. And that's what a lot of people make mistakes of, is they say, well, I'll have a web output from this mixer. That's very hard to do well. Last question.
The last one's really a comment from Tlalak Lopez Waterman. Audio Wednesday, batting 1,000. Thank you all.
Go. Thanks, Tlalak. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, thanks, Tlalak. I just wanted to squeeze in. I just saw this yesterday for audio on Audacity. If you're using Audacity on a Windows PC, there's a new OpenVino, which is an AI plugin for Audacity. It's free to download and adds a lot of AI tools for transcription powered by Whisper.io and noise suppression. And actually, you can take music and separate out the individual instruments using AI. So take a look at that.
Absolutely. And thanks, Tlalak. And thanks to the incredible panel that came here to do this conversation. It's really great when we have these experts here able to really kind of walk us through these details. We really appreciate everybody's contribution today. It really made a difference. And thanks to the producers who are asking all these great questions, keeping the conversation moving forward. And thank you to the incredible team on the back end that is organizing these, managing them, cutting the show, developing the hardware and software solutions for the show, and figuring out how to actually get this out every single day, 7 days a week. We really appreciate all of your effort. The Tlalak Traversal today, if we had to walk around and ask these questions, we would have traveled 74,000 miles, 118,000 kilometers, and that is 583 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was great.
Nice work.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks,
Realizing how much I don't know. To get the professor in.
I've been figuring that out my whole life.
Well, that's what we try to get done when we can, when we're at our best. It's being able to have folks that have a lot more life experience talking to what those things are, and giving us real examples and talking about them. It's great. It's a good day. It's a good morning. Great work.
Bye-bye.
See you guys soon.
10 minutes. See you in
Thanks,
After
Mickey.
Hours.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.